and welcome to Hope Today. One of the best parts of our day is to spend it with you. I'm Amy Schaefer, and I'm here with Tom and Sydney. What's happening today?
I'm really excited because coming up on Hope Today, one man's story of divine interventions in the midst of poverty, war, discrimination, and loss. In a moment, you'll meet Emmanuel Ike and hear his testimony how the hand of God pulled him out of poverty, saved him during the Nigerian Civil War, and touched his family after the tragic loss of his son. He's going to share the lessons and the principles he's learned along the way so you can also apply them to your life when you face adversity. You know, Tom and Amy, I love when we're able to hear somebody's testimony of, I think of the scripture, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And Mr. Emmanuel, he's a Christian leader here in our city, and I just think you're going to be so inspired by the things that he walked through, but how God was with him in the midst of it all. So you definitely want to stay tuned. It's going to be a really special time to hear his story.
I love people's stories, and especially when they've been through a time where we would not choose to go through the times that Emmanuel has gone through, but to come out the other side glorifying God and seeing God's provision. It's so important. Guys, I just want to say real quick, some of you may have been wanting to tune in to see Sheila Walsh, who was going to be the guest today, and because of circumstances, we could not have her today, but stay with us. Do not leave. Stay here and hear a tremendous story of God's grace.
Talking about stories, I was recently with a group of friends, and they were sharing their stories that were really hard and really painful. And I'm looking at the beauty and the depth and the richness of these girls today. And I thought, some of the most wealthy people I know, some of the richest people I know, are the ones where God brought them out of some of the hardest times and the hardest struggles. You want to just rescue people out of the struggle, but it's that struggle and that inner working that is producing in you patience and steadfastness and faith and trust. So today, whatever you're going through, just stay in the fight, stay in the game, keep your hopes up, keep believing God, and let that perfect work be accomplished in your life. It's going to be a really, really great day and great story.
Just when you were talking about the whole thing of hearing people go through struggles, I know a lot of us right now, wake up, what's happening in the economy, what's going on with our finances. A lot of people are going through a really tough time, and maybe that's you today. Maybe you are in the fight for your life. Maybe you feel like you are surrounded, but do you know that there's one who's surrounding around you in the midst of your battles, in the midst of your struggles, and he is God. He is Emmanuel. He is God with us. And so today, if you are walking through something and you just need an extra dose of hope, you just need a little bit of encouragement, well, we are always here for you 24/7. So you can give us a call at our prayer line at 888-665-4483 because we love to connect with you and to love on you and to stand with you because we know God's promises never fail.
Absolutely. And right now, we're going to see if we can get through a difficult time called Stump the Host. Okay, let's see if they can stump us today. In fact, we need your help, so please play along with us. We have not seen these questions yet. So here's question number one, guys. Where did the workers work for different hours but were all paid 1 denarius?
In the fields.
In the fields?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm tempted to say in the Bible, but we're going to say in the fields.
Yay!
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
In the vineyard, yeah.
in the vineyard.
That's
Vineyards
a
in
good
the field.
story because if you were working the hardest and the longest and you've been there for the most time and the guy that just came in the vineyard got the same pay as you, I'm just saying there's a lot going on in your heart.
I'll tell you what, it would have been a complaint filed with the union steward.
Exactly. A lot of complaining going on in the vineyard.
Oh, yikes. Well, here's question number 2. Which is the only personal letter in the New Testament?
I'm going to say Philemon.
I was going to say Titus isn't a book. Did I make that up?
I mean, Timothy is written to Timothy.
I feel like
Paul writing to Timothy
Was written to Philemon about his.
Neil, our producer, you've stumped us today.
You know what? You read the question.
I'm saying
Make
Timothy.
the call.
If you guys,
But
I
you guys
was
can say
saying
something
Titus, but I
different.
feel like Philemon or Titus. I don't know. If you
Make
Are
a
we
call.
one of the three?
Make a call. Sid.
what did you say?
I said Timothy.
Timothy?
Paul writing to Timothy.
Let's say we'll say Timothy. We're gonna trust. We're gonna trust that.
Not Timothy.
Oh,
Oh, you
Oh, yikes.
What?
I need a rebuttal on that.
All right. One more. One more. I won't say anything. One more.
Bummer.
What did Jesus use to drive the money changers out of the temple?
A whip.
Table.
And it
Well,
flipped
he
the table and he had a
table.
whip.
He had a whip.
He had a
Okay.
whip of cords. A whip. He had a whip.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. We got back on
For
track.
all the people that think Jesus was wimpy,
Good one. Good
he
one.
was one
your table
amazing
over.
man.
So we are so grateful that you always play along with us with Stump the Host. We know so many of you love that segment, so it's a joy to always play along with you. But stay with us, because when we come back, you're going to hear the testimony of Emmanuel Ike and God's divine intervention in throughout his life. It's going to inspire you, to touch you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Cancel culture, sexual immorality, abortion, gender transformations, controversial Supreme Court ruling. What's behind America's changing culture? Is there something deeper God is calling us to discover? Jonathan Cahn's new and most explosive book yet, The Return of the Gods, reveals how past secrets of the Middle East and Mesopotamia may be playing out in our world today. Prepare to go on a fascinating journey revealing the ancient demonic entities possibly influencing our day and age. Learn about parables and inscriptions from long ago and why what we dismissed as mythology could be shaping what's currently unfolding in our nation and what lies ahead for our future. Request Return of the Gods as your thank you gift when you give to support Cornerstone Television Network. To give, call 888-665-4483 or go to ctvn.org/donate.
Behind Emmanuel Ike's success as a certified public accountant, there's an even greater story of divine intervention throughout his life. As a husband, a father, and servant of Christ, he has witnessed firsthand God's grace and hand of protection in the midst of adversity. In his autobiography, Rescued: My Stories of Divine Intervention, Emmanuel shares his life story of how God pulled him from poverty, saved him during Nigeria's civil war, and turned a family tragedy into an opportunity to bless his people in his homeland of Nigeria. Mr. Emmanuel, it is such a joy to have you with us today.
My pleasure to be here.
You have such a tremendous life story. You have seen God just move in and out of your life. Can you take us back to when you were growing up? Because you faced tragedy and hardship at a very young age.
That's correct, Sydney. My dad was the first person to be saved when the missionaries came into my village. And then my grandfather drove him out of the family. And through some traditional reconciliations, he came back. When he came back, he reached out to all his brothers. So when you come to my family, his name is Gabriel, Michael, David, Agnes. Wow. So he ended up having 8 children, of which I'm the last. And apparently when I was born, if it were for the devil's choice, I could have died in the womb. So shortly after I was born, 2 years, I would say, my mom died, and my hardship began in life. And my dad was not there because he was a subsistence farmer. What he was doing was to try to raise food enough to feed us. And when the farm is not doing very well, of course we starve. I remember going to school without food in the morning and coming back having difficulty to walk on the street. And there was really no money to pay school fees. And sometimes we didn't go to school. That was elementary school and kindergarten and so forth. So that's how my life started. And all my siblings, the grown-up ones, had already gone. So there was about 3 or 4 of us left. And early in the morning, my dad would leave. My mom wasn't there. So apparently they decided to send me to, per se, moms. Mm-hmm. And I was a crybaby. I cried all my life, even up to 30 years old, looking for mommy. Mm. And then finally, people decided to ship me back to my father. And then, fortunately enough, I had a sister who was 12 years old who raised me up. Thank God she's still alive today, about 85 years old now. Wow. So, and then when she got married, I remember when I was very young, she would I would cry and cry and cry, and she would leave me somewhere by the tree and then stood afar off looking at me because there was nothing she could do. There was no food to give to me or milk or anything. And then when she got married, my father got remarried to a younger person. So a younger lady, and then I became a slave of the family.
I have to ask you, did you live through the Biafra? I mean, I remember hearing about there was no food in Biafra, that whole in the late 60s, early 70s. You lived through that.
And definitely, before that, what my father decided to do was to send me to a slave master. You know, I became the boy of the family, and one of them treated me so ugly and almost killed me, so I had to run away. And then I ran back to my brothers, who finally found another slave master for me. And then during this time of serving the second slave master, the Biafra War broke out. So we all ran the big city where we used to live, ran back to the village. There was no education, no market, nothing for young people to do. And there were about 12 of us who decided to join the war. And during the war, it was horrible experience, because I was, being a radical now, not having mom to, train me, or father around me when I was growing up. I found a place to really live a radical life, smoking Benson and Hedges and marijuana and so forth, to stay high. And I remember during that war, I was a machine gun shooter. So we were shooting the machine gun. Unfortunately, a sniper found us and shot the bullet. The head of the other guy was on the right, and mine was on the left, right next to his hand. So the bullet hit, boom. And then he cried, "My hand, my hand, my hand." And said, "What happened?" "Bullet, bullet, bullet, bullet." So that's when the second time the enemy wanted to take me out. Wow. But it didn't happen.
Wow.
So to cut the long story short, and after a while, I decided to run away from the war front to go back to the camp on River Niger, rather. And we spent 2 days in the camp, no clothes on our body, no food to eat. And the first day, we found ourselves in the Everglades of River Niger. Monkeys, crocodiles, and poisonous snakes, and mosquitoes, and whatever is biteable. So we were, sort of food for the mosquitoes. But God is good, because in spite of the fact that we did not have compass, we didn't have even paddles, because, I lost my paddle in the water trying to help the other guy out, and bushes that we had to use our hands to tear up. God sent his angels, because after the first day I shouted and looked up to heaven. I said, "God, if you could save me from this place, I'll serve you all my days long." Wow. He sent his angels to send us exactly where he wanted us, where we were trying to get to. And the war continued. It was a 3-year war. And then the last day that the war was supposed to end, or ended, one of the major cities of the Biafran rebels, they used to call us, was falling. And they transported us across the River Niger to go and defend that city. So immediately we crossed the River Niger, it was announced that the war was over. Wow. Of the 12 young men that joined the war, only 4 of us came back. I came out of that without a scratch on my body. Some died in the war front, and they were not recovered. And so the war ended, and then my life began. No education, nothing, and nothing to go to, no school to go to. Even if there was school to go to, my brothers did not have the money to send me to school. My father did not have the money, he was getting old. So they decided that, you don't have any brain to go to school after all, because I didn't pass, grade school. So I started at home. But God is so kind, because even in the midst of all that, I wanted to join the rock band in the days of James Brown.
The rock? You want to be James
It's
Brown?
not in this book. Not in the book. My hair used to look like James Brown. My pants and my shoes. No. Everywhere I went, I was shouting, "Yeah, I feel good." That was when God actually got hold of me.
Wow.
And he said, look at him. If I know I have a future for him.
Yeah.
If I let him go, he will get lost. So, anyway.
And God, your story is so captivating, and just what I love is talk to us about like the door of opportunity through education, because that really was your way out and it got you here to America. So tell us about that transition.
So in that big city, my brother was a banker, and of course he has concluded that I did not have the brain to go to school. So, but I met 3 young men who were really polished when I became a Christian in a local church. They used to speak English like the British people. And then I had become a Christian now. The Holy Spirit is now walking through me and saying, you can befriend these people. They can show you ways, you know. So I befriended them, and they began to tell me about going to America. Well, you go to America, you don't have any high school education. You know, what are you going to America to do, you know? But then I was determined, and I knew how to pray, and I knew how to fast. So most of the times I would lock my door. There was no food to eat anyway because I was very poor. So I used that opportunity to fast and pray. And I remembered fasting and praying. God used to visit me with dreams and visions and telling me ways, you know, of life. Wow. And it was just like, okay, I need passport. I need money to pay school fees. I need a sponsor. How could I go? How do I go about these things? So God sent people in the dream to give me my passport. And it happened exactly that way. Somebody, you know, when one day we came out from the church, the young man that God introduced me to began to talk about, Emmanuel needs some help, he needs some passport. And that young man came to, you know, listen to our discussion. And he came to me and said, don't worry, I'll get you your passport. Then a month later on, he came back, just like God showed me in the dream, and said, here is your passport. Wow. And my elder brother, who was a baker, was able to give me $1,300 to pay for the, you know, half of the school fees to a Christian college called Huntington College in the state of Indiana. I passed GDE in 3 years. And then people who were in high school were coming to me, asking me, how did you do it? And I said, I used that opportunity, of course, to introduce them to Christ. So with my GDE, my friend helped me to put transcript together. And I sent them the transcript out to Christian colleges, and then the admission landed. It was just like, wow, me? Going to America, you know. So God opened the door. I was denied visa because, you know, the American embassy has, you know, looked at the transcript and my background, and it was just like, God, you told me you are going to America. You put me in an airplane. You sent me to a country that I did not know in the dream. And then I went back the second time. My sponsor now, God gave me a sponsor who was willing now to bring everything necessary to, you know, get visa. And then the interview. I was at the interview, and they asked him one specific question. Most young people go to America and they never return back to Nigeria. What are you going to do about it? And he said to them, I've married him a wife, and he's coming back. And then they took my passport, and when they came back, they stamped the visa to go to America. It was a rumor all over. Emmanuel is going to America. Emmanuel, how did he do it, you know? I said, it is the Lord's doing. It was just like he took me out of a horrible pit, you know, and brought me out from a miry clay and set my feet upon the rock and put a song in my mouth to sing. Wow. So I was filled with excitement. And of course, my wife, who then had about 5 men lined up to marry her.
Oh, no, tell us the story.
I was the least. I was the least. I said, oh, you didn't have high school education. Some of these people were college graduates. Some were doing their masters. Are you sure?
Yeah, but you could sing like James Brown. See, that was the difference.
She wanted James Brown. That's what
But I know, like, so, like, you married your wife, and she was still in Nigeria while you were going to school. You were in Huntington College, and I know, like, reading in your book that you landed, and you're like, I'm in Indiana, and this is not what you thought it would be, but God was with you every step of the way, because understanding the culture and just the curriculum and the way that we do things, and you were studying in, like, for accounting and business and all things, and God opened a door for you through that to be able to provide for your family.
It's amazing going to the university without having with a, what do you call it, grade school brain. Yeah. It wasn't easy at all. And I came here, I didn't know anybody. Yeah. And my friends were not there. So it was difficult. It was very, very difficult time for me. I was, of course, very depressed too. So my time is kind of, but God turned everything around. And then after a year, my wife came, and then I turned from F's to A in my classes. And then God brought her, and she went to pre-med, and then later on became a doctor. And, and God has just started to bless us, and I thank God for His goodness in our lives. Sometimes we think that God is not listening, God is not seeing. You know, we have open heaven. I'm beginning to learn about open heaven. If God were to let us go through difficulties to get to Him, He should have put layers from earth to heaven. But He's a God near at hand, and when we cry to Him, He hears us. Amen.
That's true.
So.
And Emmanuel, tell us a little bit about your family. I mean, you're CFO now can you tell us about the organization that you work for and the things that you've done?
Yeah. Well, I retired in 2016, and before that time, I spent about 32 years in the corporate world as an auditor. An auditor of an insurance company, and U.S. Steel, about 10 and a half years in U.S. Steel, a leader to take group of people, excuse me, to go to the audit field and the factories to teach them how to audit. Now, this is the guy that doesn't have brain to go to school. Now he's teaching people how to do things, even in America.
Right.
So God is awesome. He's the author of wisdom. Yes. And now, when I was reading, trying to educate myself, I had one principle. I borrowed books from Oxford universities with grade school education. But one thing I did was that I knew how to pray and fast. So when I read about things that I did not understand, I'll lay the book aside, I'll kneel down, and I said to God, you give people wisdom to write these books. Please, can you please give me wisdom to understand it? Wow. And He did.
Wow.
So I left U.S. Steel and founded my own consulting firm. God blessed it. And during the time of economic downturn in 2008, I was having difficulties because people were not paying. So He sent me, He opened a door in medical health center at the north side of Pittsburgh, which I did not solicit for. And someone just called me in and said, hey, give an employment letter. So God put me there as a chief financial officer, one of the 3 leaders of the medical center.
And let's talk more. I know we're running out of time, yes. But I know we have to get to the story about your son Blessing and now what you're doing with the Blessing Foundation. So you can just take 2 minutes and just share about your son.
It's amazing how God looks at the future when He looks at us. I at least understood what was happening when my son passed. And of course, he graduated from Clarion University, special ed major, and then began to teach in the Baltimore school districts. Then one semester, he had developed Hodgkin's lymphoma. And we said, okay, it's going to be 6 months, we'll get it done, and you'll get back to life. But it lasted almost 5 years, and Blessing did not survive. So I remember us coming back home and saying to one another, about 5 of us, the other 3 children, me and my wife, what are we going to do out of where is God leading us out of this? So we decided right there to establish a foundation, which God began to use to educate the orphans in Africa. And we educated about at least 8 children, and one of them is a medical doctor too. And so today we are reaching out to Africa, and God is doing some marvelous things. I remember I spent 1 month in Africa this year, and when I got to the crowd, what came out from my mouth was, wow, because I did not know what God was going to do. We had 11 doctors and 6 eye doctors, 7 nurses. We had over 5,000 people in the crowd, and we all ministered to them, fed them. About 500 of them came to know Jesus Christ, and 375 of them we baptized in the River Nile.
Wow.
And so that's a brief story about
Blessing
what
Foundation.
the Blessing Foundation. And of course, we are going to be having a banquet at the DoubleTree on November the 12th. We are inviting people to come free. My wife told me, no ticket. Come and hear the story. And if God touches your heart, help us out. Because we started this with 100% of the family funds. It was funded 100% from the beginning. Last year it was about 55%. But God is doing some wonders. And I really appreciate the opportunity that you have given me to share this.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
What an incredible, I'm just so touched by your story. And his book is called Rescue, My Stories of Divine Intervention. Your life story is truly incredible. The hand of God and the divine ways that he stepped in through every step of the way. And now you're able to give back to your people in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel, for just being with us and just sharing your heart and your testimony.
And with a few seconds, it's not only in Nigeria, and then in Uganda, where I've been in Madagascar. Wow. During the COVID, we were able to feed about 1,350 people because we couldn't go anywhere. So
and we'll have a link to Emmanuel's website on our website, ctvn.org, information about the banquet. It's free. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, and the book is in Amazon anyway, and Barnes and Nobles, and also in Kindle.
That's
so
great.
If you're free, come to the banquet, you get it for $10.
So it's all good. Well, again, Emmanuel, thank you so much for what you shared. And I just love this, guys, because it is so important to recognize that God is a God who responds when we're going through those difficulties. Most of us have not gone through the difficulties Emmanuel did, but God saw him and rescued him from where he was and set his feet upon a solid rock. And he can do that for you today.
On tomorrow's Hope Today, discover the keys to navigating a seamless pastoral transition. Author Lee Kreitcher focuses on 3 leadership imperatives to embrace and 6 leadership pitfalls to avoid during pastoral transitions. That's tomorrow on Hope Today.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.